You know the Magna culture, right? Nobody works for me. You people work with me. I'm working for you. The history of mankind has always been dominated by the golden rule. Here's the gold makes the rule. But I don't want to be dominated by anyone. If I feel that strong, I should not be able to dominate somebody either.
Hello there, and welcome back. I'm Richard Dolan in conversation with our very own Frank Stronach. As you know, and if you've been following our conversations, whether over a cup of coffee or a glass of coconut water, there's nothing coconut about these conversations. As we dive deep into geopolitical conversation in what's going on the landscape for the economy, for the political environment, and you, our fellow Canadians. As you know, Frank has not only been the founder of one of the most historically successful companies in the history of entrepreneurship, he is now the champion for teaching others on not only how to think like an entrepreneur, but be free in doing so. This gave rise to his very own Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, as well as the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship. To talk more about it today, and especially in the environment we're in, we're joined live here with our dear friend, Frank. Frank, good morning, and how are you, my friend?
Good morning. It's, again, great to see you, right?
It's always good to be seen.
Maybe instead of coconut water, we should have a glass of wine.
This could be true, but
it could be, there's the old saying, you give a man a glass of wine and you get to know his personality.
This is true. That's why they call it a colorful conversation. And by the way, I'm no stranger to wine with you, my friend. But all kidding aside, you know, as those who are following these conversations, those who are on our YouTube channel, the Vimeo channel, whether they're on the websites or on your social media handles and watching this, whether it's in real time or at some time, there's no shortage of news today, Frank, with what's going on geopolitically for our fellow Canadians. And to kind of frame today's conversation, because we're going to focus on the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, which is built on your fair enterprise philosophy, blueprint, an evolutionary process, as you called it. We'll get to that shortly. But I want to share with you some highlights that our producer, Ivana, shared for us. And I want to make sure I share with you, our viewers. The Globe and Mail reported, Frank, and I want to share this, and I quote, "It's no secret that our country faces today another historically challenging time in the form of the Trump administration. There is no sugarcoating that." This is said by our former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. He went on to say that the bulk of the problems that afflict our country, falling living standards, declining employment and housing opportunities, rising crime, and the growing divisions between our regions and our people, these were not created by Donald Trump. Now, what I find fascinating is that there is a new honesty amongst our leadership. And I know it's an evolutionary process too, but what I do want to just get you really present to, and I want to make sure I share this. When Mr. Harper stood on stage to endorse the current running candidate, Mr. Poilievre, he went on to say that the challenges Canada faces from the US should not be another excuse for any party to fail. In fact, he said this could be a historic opportunity to create a country with the highest living standards in the world, enjoyed not just by the protected elites, but by all people across the country. Now, I have to admit, when Ivana gave this to me, I felt like saying, did Frank Stronach coach the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Stephen Harper? Because it feels like I can hear a little bit of your thinking in here. Do you agree that politicians are beginning to realize that much of what you've been saying after decades is coming to pass?
Well, I don't want to get into politics because I like to stay away I'm promoting, I really believe Canada should have an economic charter of rights, right? And I'm stating over and over, the human charter of rights alone is not sufficient. We have to support it with an economic charter of rights. Economic charters of rights will lead to economic democracies, and economic democracies are the basis for democracy itself. Okay, and I'm blaming both the liberal governments and the conservative governments. They, over the last 50 years, they alternated, right? But none of them really put economic program together, and both parties, when they had a majority, etc., they didn't balance budgets. The debt was rising and rising, and the bureaucracy was rising. So we cannot blame one on it because it's the same over. We need, but even though I knew most of the politicians, right? Matter of fact, Brian Mulroney was on our board, Mike Harris, Bill Davis, and quite some prominent liberals as well, right? Including the president of the World Bank, right? So the problem is politics doesn't work, okay? Politics is, I know most of the people, and they basically, they want to have input to a better country, etc. Right? But it's the system. They're trapped in a system because, especially when young politicians get into it and say, I really want to change Canada, I really want to get things going. The older politicians say, you can't say that. We won't be elected, because anytime you bring forward something new, you can be criticized, right? That's the dilemma. We got to change the system, right? We cannot leave the politicians where they would guide the economy. We got to get it away from the politicians, right? So the Economic Charter of Rights really is only 7 economic principles, nothing to do with politics, right? So they still don't understand it, because the problem is, well, 90% or 95% of the politicians, I think they never paid the wages. Okay? Once when you start paying wages, you know what the economy is all about, right? So we have a dilemma, right? So we cannot really, and you cannot really have an economy unless you got an Economic Charter of Rights, right? The essence of the Economic Charter of Rights purely says workers have a moral right to some of the profits. And without workers, you can't make a profit. So it's who could be against it, right? And but the most important thing is, if you don't make capitalists out of the workers, we haven't got a capitalistic system.
Now, I want to slipstream with you there. I don't mean to interrupt you, because whenever you're speaking, I think the world is listening. But I do want to just underscore something, because sometimes I think people would be watching a conversation saying, well, hold on a second. Frank Stronach, I mean, is he a bored billionaire or a disgruntled tax provider and taxpayer? And I have to remind people that today, the company you founded off a workbench on DuPont Street employs over 179,000 people. So your opinion has been earned across thousands, tens of thousands of people who've been employed by you, where over time you've learned firsthand by working with politicians, collaborating with municipalities, gaining permissions, erecting factories. So this insight you have, Frank, and I say this as a fan and as your friend, and in this case, a conversationalist with you, is that you've learned these things firsthand. You've worked with politicians, you've worked with constituents, you've worked with people who've been concerned about their standards of living and about their financial future. So is it fair to say that much of your view and some of your opinion has been afforded by decades of service, being an entrepreneur? Would you agree?
Well, yes, to be an entrepreneur, you always got to see, can you make things better? Is there a better answer? Is there a better solution for whatever the problem might be?
Well, and that's why, and I want to quote you. There's recently, as our producer Ivana shared with me, there's a great quote that she captured, and she said that you had said that government, you said, Frank, should not get out of the way of entrepreneurs. If they get out of the way of entrepreneurs, they can get to what they must do. You said, let them do what they do best. Create jobs, create wealth. In governments getting out of the way of entrepreneurs, what do you mean by that?
Well, basically I'm saying small business hardly makes any monies, very little monies. So I'm saying we should not have a business tax on small business. And let me quantify what small business is. Small business, I would classify 300 employees or less. So I'm saying get the regulators out and get the tax people, get the taxmen out and get the regulators out and let small business operate like free enterprise. We got to realize, without free enterprise, we haven't got a free society. And there's no more free enterprise. We got to get back, right? We got to dismantle all the regulators, right? And we got to have a straightforward, a black and white tax system, right? Because our tax system is so convoluted. There's thousands and hundreds of thousands of convoluted tax paragraphs, right? There's no way a country can function under those.
Well, it's interesting in current news, just given the lay of the land where Donald J. Trump, the 47th president, the sitting president, and his administration has been lobbying what some would call tariff wars. And it seems like there's some hope in the air from our political current leader, right now in terms of Mr. My goodness, I just lost my track of thought. I think it's Mark Carney. Now, what's amazing is that they're offering many great tax credits and benefits. Do you think that often the government responds and reacts too late, or do you think on point?
Well, it's too late, and they never. There was no rationale to anyone before, right? It's just because, for the simple reason, you cannot make a profit without workers. Okay, and we have, again, I'm using the quotes, society came a long way from the caveman to the hunted, to the kings and to the servants. And now we have an environment, we have bosses and disgruntled workers. Okay, we still don't get it, right? Okay, and but there is now the big question will come, or the number one problem will come. What philosophies or what structures will we have in the years to come? Basically, it boils down to we have two structures, right? Two economic systems: the communistic one and the capitalistic one. And the capitalistic one is self-destroying because. Again, I want to point out the laws of nature are much stronger than any man-made law. And the law of nature is when a species does not reproduce itself, other species will take over. The capitalistic species does not reproduce itself. Every day there's less capitalists. And I'm saying I want to wake people up and say, look, we're used to freedom. Freedom is the number one for the people in the Western societies, right? Because people died for freedom, right? So the capitalistic system, more and more capital is helped by fewer and fewer, right? There's about 1%, which holds 50% of all the capital, right? In the States, I think, as well as in Canada. So there's something drastically wrong.
Given that Ontario businesses, as reported by CBC, will start to see select provincial taxes deferred for 6 months, which Premier Doug Ford actually says will give them about $9 billion worth of relief amid this global economic turmoil thanks to these tariffs. And with the erasure of billions, if not trillions of dollars in wealth, some estimate that there's as much as $10 trillion or more that's just evaporated in value from people's retirement savings plans, their retirement plans in the States. Do you feel that our government here in Ontario is doing enough to be able to curb the impact?
Well, again, the government can't give you anything unless they take it away from you in the first place. You just get deeper and deeper in the hole. The problem, look, is why don't they say, look, workers are entitled to, well, let's take the red tape off, let's get the regulators out of a small company, let's get the taxmen out of small companies and let them operate the way they operated 50, 70, 80 years ago. And again, where I like to point out, when I opened up my first factory in Canada around 65 years ago, I just put a sign up, Tool and Die business, Tool and Die open for business. I didn't need any permits. For years, I did not need any permits. It just was great, right? Okay. So anyway, we only can, the only way we can fix it is to take the chains of small business, give them the rope, and get the taxmen out of things, get the regulators out of their business, and let them operate. Okay.
Well, I love that you've said that because it's a wonderful segue. When you just said it, 50 to 80 years ago, the way business was done, and you cited your own personal story of 65 years ago, being able to put up open for business placard, and on you went. That feels to me, Frank, as why and how safe the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship was founded. It feels like it's an homage to the way the entrepreneurial spirit once was, bringing things back to basics. And when you explore just how safe came to be, let me just first ask this. Why, at your stage in life, you're keenly interested in teaching people how to build a business and grow a business the Stronach way?
Well, I consider myself very blessed with good health and a good mind.
Good hair.
And I have a conscience,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So when we're young, we all hustle a bit to make some monies that we can live in dignity. I have over 400 factories in 34 different countries. I could live in dignity in 34 different countries. I chose Canada. It's a great, great country, right? And my conscience tells me I've accumulated a lot of know-how, a lot of experiences, and I wanna roll that over to, call it, to young Canadians, because it's the only way. Without economic charters of rights, you cannot have democracy, right? That's the basis for democracy itself. So again, I should quickly, again, how that evolutionary process took place, right? I arrived with $200 in Toronto in '54, right? And didn't know anybody. Did find a job very soon in a tool and die shop, small shop. Then people, after a few months' stillness, said to me, "Frank, you're doing a great job. I want you to be a partner of mine." He was a nice guy, nice man, but he never wrote it down. So I'm saying, gee, there's nothing to it to run a thing here. So I looked in the paper where I found a job to get double the money, right? I took a very simple room. The toilets and the showers were out in the hallway. And by '57, I had $5,000 saved up, and I rented a small building and bought a few used machines, and out I went hustling. I worked in the factories, and I said, I'm good at solving problems. If I can't solve them, you don't have to pay me. So obviously I solved problems, because after 1 month I hired somebody, after 1 year 10 people, after 2 years 20. And this is now a critical point which I want to get across. I noticed my foreman was a little different, so I said to you, his name was Herman, a German fellow. I said, Herman, what's the matter with you lately? Well, he said, Frank, I want to start my own business. I said, well, I sympathize with that, because, he started practically as the first employee, right? So I said, look, let's talk tomorrow. I said, maybe we find a better solution, a good solution which you would like. That evening I was talking to myself. If that foreman's going to leave me, it will stifle my growth. It's a bad deal. The next reason I liked even less. If that foreman's going to leave me, I can do all the work myself. I liked it even less. And the third reason was, if I hire a new foreman and I don't show him how business is run, I still got to do all the work. And if I show him how business is run, then it's just a question of time. He would leave again. So basically I said to him the next day, Herman, why don't we open up a new factory on 2/3? He looked at me and said, you mean it? I said, yes. We went right away to a lawyer, wrote it down, and built the factory, and he worked like crazy. That was his factory. He was proud. Over the next few years, I took another foreman, another foreman, another foreman. I repeated that. So I had 7 factories, cash flow like crazy. I came, I philosophically, I counted my blessings, and things like that come back, right? I've seen the highest of the highest, the lows of the lows. The lows of the lows were when I was hungry, not to lose weight. I was hungry. I had no money to buy food. Those things come back, where I say, "Gee, can I make a contribution to a better society, a society which could function better?" This is the way the fair enterprise system came together, right? The fair enterprise system, I registered it in 1955, right? And I think it's very important for the academy that this would be one of the written things, knowledge papers they would get. I guess you would want to make a comment?
Yeah, no, of course I would love to. And by the way, this is just a conversation. So if I interrupt you, it's only because I'm being excited,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure our viewers are too. What you're referring to, Frank, is, and I want to make sure I get people present to this, the fair enterprise model, you call it the blueprint. And what people at home need to watch and understand is that we're talking about the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship now. I believe the foundation is the fair enterprise model. Yes. And what I love is when I asked you, where did you come up with this idea? You said it was an evolutionary process. So this is what I want to underscore, and it's so important, my friend. How rare is it that we get the opportunity of getting an entrepreneur like yourself with the gravity of success that you've accomplished to be able to say that I've developed an ideology, a mindset that was built over decades of experience, of wins and losses, that now you have, in essence, a shortcut to building a business yourself or dominating an industry if you choose. Frank, why was the Fair Enterprise Institute, this mindset, this blueprint, why would you describe it as evolutionary? What makes it so?
Well, it's evolutionary because I systemized it in a tangible way. And the very core of it is I came to the conclusion that without workers you can't make a profit. So I put in a corporate constitution, right? If you mean something, you put it down so people understand, and it's in a tangible way. You gotta follow those principles, right? Okay, you cannot change it around, right? It's a This is basically an economic charter of rights, which I applied to the company I created, right? And in due time, I see, look, the whole country could be running like that. So that's the most interesting part. So we have, we should send it to the student. That's part of the thing, the systemized, what fair enterprise is all about, the way it functions, the way it's structured, the way, so.
How revolutionary was it at the time, Frank? I can't even imagine. I feel like everyone's been watching black and white televisions, let's say back in the 50s, and all of a sudden you came out with a color television. And I'm just talking metaphorically. This was a radical departure from traditional business. Being able to understand the role and the place and the purpose of labor and management and capital for the betterment of society. But what did your partners and fellow investors and your staff and workers think of this?
Well,
how was it received?
I mean, the market, the investors, they liked it. The Magna shares just climbed like it followed the trail, right? Because when I put in this corporate constitution, right, in which in tangible terms it says 20% of the profits the investors get, the shareholders get. 10% of the profits the workers get over and above their wages, 6% the management got, 7% of the profits went into research, and 2% of the profits went to charity, right? Charity in the later years were 200-300 million a year, which I could get. That's the greater part was when you could when you could support different communities, different causes. That's the greatest part about having a great company, right? So that was in tangible terms, right? It doesn't work that when you have an owner and say, give him, here's a little bit and there, maybe last week we didn't make any. It's in a tangible term.
Well, what I love about this is that if for those who are watching and the historians that are paying attention to the Frank Stronach model for success, Magna was not just a success as a business because of what you did and how you did it. I mean, today people can argue that Magna employs more people than Ford and GM combined. These are the facts. But what I love about what you said, and I want to make sure I underscore it, dear friend, is that Magna as a business did very well because of your vision and your blueprint, yes? But as a company and for the shareholders, the reason why it became the darling of Wall Street, the darling of Bay Street, a stock worth owning, is because you applied this ideology where you were sharing profits with not just investors, which is traditional. You were doing so with the workers. You were doing so with the managers. You were reinvesting parts of the profit into research and the futurization of the company and giving back at the same time.
Yeah, basically, we call it the founder price. It was really a culture, right? The culture basically stated in tangible terms that the workers get 10%, right? We had it computerized, right? So when I put in that system, I released that energy of untold proportions, right? Because workers now, all of a sudden, they're on the front line. They know best how to make things, huh? So in their mind, they say, look, I'm a part owner. I am shares and I'm a part owner, and I get a portion, and that's why we made such profits, right? Okay, and I built somewhere in the world, I built about 2 or 3 factories every month, right? Okay, so I think it's so important that it's the economy, right?
But tell me.
It was a culture. It was the forerunner, basically, for the economic charter of rights, right? Because it grew so large, it's practically like a country, right? Okay.
That's right.
With the very key too is that there were principles, right? For instance, management could only get 6%. You see, I had control. I had the majority of the thing here, right? I put in the corporate constitution and say, look, the most I could take out is 6%. When I went to my law firm and I said, I want to put in this constitution, they said, Frank, are you crazy? You own the company, you could take 20% of the profits or 30, and nobody could stop you. I said, no, I gotta have a system which there is a discipline and rules, okay, which the company is guided by. So basically, I'm saying the same thing. When it comes down to the economy, you cannot let the politicians run the country. The thing has to be it has to be enshrined in an economic charter of rights.
Yes.
The politicians just can't look. We want to be re-elected. Now we got this. We're going to promise the public this, and this. They can't give you anything unless they take it away from you first, right? That's the dilemma. So you need, we got to have a system where the politicians they must have balanced budgets.
Yeah.
Okay, a society cannot function in any way, and unless we come to that thing here, we go haywire. We're going to look the next few years, unless we really go think, it's going to be totally haywire.
Well, we don't want haywire, especially here in this conversation. And if you're just joining us, we're in a conversation with Frank Stronach, visionary philanthropreneur, where he marries philanthropy and being an entrepreneur together, making an impact. But Frank, we recently had a chat. I don't know if you recall this, but you said to me after sharing some dialogue over a phone call, and you said, Richard, and you had this long dramatic pause, and you said, I see the future. Do you remember you telling me that?
Yeah.
And so that's what he says to me. I see the future. Now, of course, it reminded me, and I've never told you this, Frank, so I saved this insight for you that there was an old mystical story about Merlin. Remember Merlin? The King Arthur days. And there's a story told about King Arthur who, on a particular day, we think it was a Sunday, he felt like going for a ride into the royal forest. And he didn't want to go with public decree. He didn't want to do so with a banner afloat and with trumpets going, like, here comes the king. He wanted to just go for a simple ride. He just wanted to get out a little bit. So as he galloped his way into the forest, he went into a part of it that he'd never gone before. And as he entered deep into that part of the forest, he noticed a hut. And in that hut, there was a chimney stack, and it was bellowing some air, some smoke, of course. So he dismounted his horse to approach this hut to see who lived there, because he didn't see this hut before. And as he approached the door opened, and Merlin appeared. And Merlin said, "Your Majesty, I've been expecting you." And King Arthur noticed in the distance there was a table set for two by the fire rather. And he said, "This is impossible. I didn't announce I was going for a ride. There was no public decree. I'm not riding with banner. How would you have known I was coming?" And here it comes. Merlin said to King Arthur, "Well, you see, my friend, I was born in the future and live into the present, while mere mortals live from the present and hope for a future." See, that story reminds me of you because I feel like you were born in the future. You were born in a place where you saw it all, you saw it coming, you created the fair enterprise blueprint, the system, the charter that gave rise to the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. Is it possible that you've seen the future, Frank? Is that a good story to tell? Are you Merlin?
In case of King Arthur, right? He may in the royal forest. If you see some smoke climbing up, he has an obligation to go there and say and prevent the fire. That reminds me the two farmers. They were called the one farmer, his neighbor, and they asked him, "Does your horse smoke?" "No, my horse doesn't smoke." "Well, then your barn is on fire." Okay, so it's
common sense. You're talking about common sense.
But that you can see in the future,
Yeah.
there's little building blocks all over the map. Huh?
Yes.
Okay, can you make the machinery to make better classes or whatever, right? Okay. It's like to make the machinery, it's like sowing seeds. Huh? It takes a certain length of time
Vision.
before the seed grows, before you can harvest. So that's why we have neglected more and more, right? The trades. We have no just financial transactions, right? Okay. So when Wall Street was pushing 50 years ago, pushing business, look, you got to make more monies, and the unions were pushing, we need higher wages. So business just left and went to China. That's the problem. We don't make things anymore. If you can only have high living standards if you make things. If you balance out your import with export, if you have a little more export, then you have a higher living standard. Right? And if you all imports, you have the lowest, and eventually a country goes broke.
Well, what I love about what you said earlier on, and talking about smoking horses and chimneys, and I don't hope I didn't interrupt you, but I want to just say something because I want to underscore it, is that no one would ever imagine that paying workers would release a massive energy. And what I'm saying, to kind of maybe pull a very loosely held story together with Merlin and King Arthur, is that to have had that vision that if you paid workers a percentage of the profits, you'd release an energy. Yes. And I feel like what you're doing when you talked about the fair enterprise model, blueprint, and system, Frank, you called it a culture. And if culture creates energy and workers being paid a piece of the profits as an energy, what you actually see is a new way to reimagine a entrepreneurial culture for Canada. And it sounds like that's what we're up to here.
Yes, it's basically that we applying the economic charter, we could eliminate poverty. And most of all too, when I take a look, it's sad when you look around.
Yeah.
That there's only a small percentage of Canadians which are economically free. And if you're not economically free, you're not a free person, right? So when I make what are the minimum standards to be economically free, right? The minimum standards would be if a Canadian woman or Canadian man worked for 30 years, they should have at least own their own house, a small house or a condo, and have at least $300,000 in the bank so they could supplement their pension fund, so they can choose the final years, the road to happiness, right? So that's the minimum standards, and we are so far away from it. Look, the last 50 years we've gone backwards, right? Our living standards are maybe less than 50% than 50 years ago. It's drastically wrong. It's the politics didn't function, huh? Too many regulators. You can't leave the politician with economic decisions. You gotta, other way it does not work.
No.
Okay, and again, I quote Winston Churchill from time to time as the greatest. He was more than a politician. He was a statesman because he hit the nail right on the head when he said, Parliament doesn't work. There's only politicians in there. He said the mandate of a politician is to be elected or re-elected, but that's not the greatest thing for the country. So he says we need a chamber of citizens to balance out the politician in parliament. But I'm saying, look, that's very cumbersome. I think I'm saying there's a more effective model. We say small business is the chamber of citizens in Canada. If small business does well, the whole country will do well. The reason if small business does well, they all will be on the same level playing field. Right now, the tax system is not that level playing field. It prefers special interest groups. And we gotta come to that conclusion.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that what you've said, if I can just continue, is that, and you've said definitively that an entrepreneur is someone who sees opportunity where others see nothing, then risks everything to bring that vision to life. As much as I know that you talked about sharing profits as a releasing of energy, I'm willing to assert, Frank, I want you to hear this carefully. I believe that the reason why you've started the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurs is because the same is true for entrepreneurship. That should an entrepreneur, as you said, is someone who sees opportunity where everyone sees nothing, then risks everything to bring that to life, that too can release an energy.
Well, there's a time period, right, when you start out a one-man operator, 2 or 3, 10 people. There's different rules or circumstances will apply, right? And the idea of the academy, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurs, is we could be of assistance to give advice, right? Practical advice. We give assistance. That's the way we did it, right? If we do it the same that I've always said, look, I want to show people that's the way I walked, or that's the way I did things. If everybody walked the same way, they could do the same thing what I could do, right?
Right.
And that's the whole idea to grow from small businesses to many small businesses, right?
I like that.
Because large businesses, especially monopolies, would be bad for society. It might just be private monopolies or state monopolies, right? We gotta get absolutely to not allow monopolies. And large companies are not the greatest thing for societies. You could be large if you have smaller companies, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be very important for people when they listen.
Please.
You know, we had over 400 factories. One of those days I got a call from a manager which run a small factories, and he said, Frank, I want to make more money. So I said, yeah, that's nice to hear that they want to make more monies. So there should be no problem. If you're smart enough, you make more monies. Well, he said, you're stifling me. You only allowed 300 employees per factory. So how can I gotta have more people so I can make more monies. I said, you're not listening. I said, if you're smart enough, finally I had to tell him, look, the smarter thing is, if you replace yourself, if you groom your assistant manager to be the manager, then you get a cut from the old factory you established, but they give you also the money you could start a new factory and do the same thing. So I had managers which replaced themselves, right? Maybe if they replaced themselves 10 times, some of them made $10 million, right? Pretty good income for a tradesman, right?
I love
Okay.
that.
Okay, so that's
please.
so important. So those would be logical things we could give advice to young people which want to start a business, which are not quite sure yet. They just maybe finished university or high school, and sometimes it takes a while till you find your level, and you sometimes it's good to get some advice, right? And I've always say, look, a cup full of common sense and a cup full of wisdom, mix that together, that will get you, that you'll be able to make the first steps.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so that's what this academy would be all about. And we get you pretty well in detail how when a small company reaches being a large company by having many small companies, and you would make more monies that way, because when you share with workers, you make more monies because they have the same interests.
I love it. So let me just pause for a moment because I want to cover a recap on much of what you said so we don't lose anyone's thinking around this. First of all, SAFE, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, feels like it could be my mentor. That's what I love. You get one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the history of Canada, and nearly, dare I say, the world, being your mentor. Your ideology, your thinking, your history, all working for you. That's just number one. Number two is you spoke about the replacement of the factory manager who got to, in fact, scale themselves, replicate themselves. And what you're touching on is really the three domains of an entrepreneur's journey: getting started, scaling, and succession, which we've talked about before. How do you exit the business, that which you've built? But more specifically, Frank, because I know this was important to you before we started today's conversation, to talk more specifically about SAFE. There are 4 steps in 4 principles of what anyone that visits SAFE, the Academy, is going to get. The first step is discovering someone's affinity. Let's just talk about that for a moment. How important is it for people to discover where their passions are, where their gifts might be better utilized, just what they have an affinity for? Why is that important to you?
Well, affinity is by nature, we're all a little different, right? Mm-hmm. And it has to do because our parents were different, right? Mm-hmm. We all ate a little different food, whatever. So some grew up healthier, smarter, but such is life, and that's the mystery of life, right? We cannot, that we, like car parts, that all the parts are exactly the same. That isn't, right? That's, the universe has created that we have a wide variety of people, right? And so, so affinity means a certain instinct, right? And I'm saying, look, Liberace could not have been one of the great pianists if he hadn't had an affinity for music and his fingers and hands, right? Okay. So, so it's very important that we could advise, look, list maybe of 4 things you would like to do or would like to have, and so it's affinity. That's very important, right?
I love that.
If you like something, you get joyful, right?
It lights you up.
You'd be happy, right?
It lights you up.
And if you put in the extra effort, you can't be one of the best, right?
I love that.
And if you be one of the best, money is a byproduct, right? So you gotta see, you shouldn't go in and make the most money is that way. You should go in and say, gee, I would like to do that, right? Go to a department store and see gadgets and say, gee, maybe I could make a gadget like that. Maybe I could make it a little better, right? That's what life is all about, right? To come up with a better product for a better price, a better solution for a better price.
Yeah, I like the spirit of what you've said because it's the old adage, love what you do and the money will follow. Love what you do and the money will follow. And I love also too that at the academy, when we help people discover their affinity, I would also add that understanding yourself better is important. Who you are, what your gifts are, what you're passionate about, what you're lit up for, and what would compensate you for giving that beautiful energy to the world in the form of a product or service. There's the second principle, Frank, that the academy stands on, and that's helping our participants select a company or an industry. Why is that important for us to help people decide on?
Well, I think it leads back to it would lead back to economic charters of rights. Right? If we start in a certain way, you got to realize if you share with the employees, you will make more monies, right? So you experiment quite a number of things here, and then the final analysis is, it's a society is only as good as what the experiences people have accumulated, right? Okay, and so I think the key of the Economic Charter of Rights, I really believe we could eliminate poverty and we could show a great percentage of people which would be economically free, right?
I love that.
I would say, look, there got to be at least 3/4 of the people economically free, right? Okay, and that should not be with all the technologies we established, etc., right? It's got to be. We got to recognize it takes workers to make things and again we're not preaching to take away from the rich. We are preaching let the workers let them participate in baking the economic pie.
I like that. I mean, what I would only add to that is that in selecting a company or an industry, what I would believe we would be doing at the Academy, inspired by your life's work, Frank, is helping entrepreneurs gain focus, being able to understand what their strategy would be, their entry to market would look like, what their communications would look like, the digitization of their materials, even understanding social media and how that implicates you or affects you or helps you. Also, in getting clear about your financial modeling, how much does it cost to build or deliver what you have, what margins are there, and implementing the fair enterprise model, helping share the profits with your workers and of course your stakeholders, etc. The third principle, Frank, though, is starting the business. I mean, a lot of people look back and say, well, it's not the 50s anymore. It must have been easier back then when all of that red tape didn't exist and Frank could put a sign outside of his shop on DuPont saying open for business. Times are different today. Starting your business, Frank, how many entrepreneurs have you come across that had a great idea, a good idea for a product, a wonderful heart, maybe even passionate, but never even got the business off the ground? You must have met your fair share.
Well, having over 400 factories, that means I created 400 entrepreneurs because we had a structure where, call it a factory manager, could run under the corporate umbrella when it's raining, but when the sun shines, he could stay outside. Okay, so it's basically you build. Look, there's a lot of ability in you. Like you just wake up. There's a lot of things you can do, right? Okay, so it's really you gotta systemize it, and there's a huge potential in every person, right? Okay.
Well, what I love about what you said is systematize. For those who are watching and understand you, you're a man who understands the importance and gravity of a system. Follow a system, understand a model, yes?
I'd like to bring forward, and maybe I should read it because
I'd love for you to read it.
I think that's the most important thing to explain the culture, right?
Please do.
And so basically, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship is based upon the principles and philosophies of the Fair Enterprise Institute. In 1995, Frank Stronach established the Fair Enterprise Institute, a policy research organization embodying the philosophy of fair enterprise. The Institute's mandate is to generate policy proposals specifically designed to improve the living standards. Fair enterprise is a system created to distribute the wealth created by business on a much fairer basis. Fair enterprise recognizes that it takes three forces to create wealth: smart managers, investors, and hardworking employees. In essence, fair enterprise gives workers the economic right to participate in capital building and accumulating wealth through profit participation. Economic charters of rights will lead to economic democracies, and economic democracies are the basis for democracy itself. Fair enterprise will reduce and balance out the great divide between the rich and the working people. So when you join the Stronach Academy, you get all the formulas, the systems, which will be of great help. You know how the profits are shared, how the system will work, right? You get the email, the paper, right? It's like a mini book, right?
Like that.
Of okay, so I think the essence is I'd like to see small companies becoming large companies by having a lot of small companies, right?
Yeah.
Because this way, workers don't become a number, okay? And workers are not servants, right? Okay, so they participate, right?
Well, and that brings me to the final point of the four principles to what the Academy does. And you can remove your glasses if you like, because I like you're far more handsome without them. I like to see you, and I know they want to see you. But in achieving operational excellence, I find it fascinating that that's the fourth principle for those who are either getting started in the business, wanting to get themselves scaled, even thinking about succession, but achieving operational excellence. What would you say to the term operational excellence? What does that mean to you, Frank?
Well, operations excellence, like it boils down to, can you make a better product for a better price? That's an ongoing process.
And does that include services as well when you say product?
A better service for a better price.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. Might it be a restaurant? Might it be a farmer? Might it be? It's the idea is a better service for a better price, a better product for a better price. That's what the fair enterprise thing teaches, practical examples.
And I love you said that, because it's a wonderful way to wind down the call, this conversation, this discussion. You said that profit is not a dirty word. You said this. You said
without a profit, a business is useless to society.
That's right.
We got to have you know, what I always wanted to get across to employees is that no government can guarantee jobs, no unions can guarantee jobs, practically nobody can guarantee jobs. There's only one guarantee where workers could have jobs, right? Is when management work together with workers to make a better product for a better price, a product you can sell. That's the best guarantee.
I like that.
Okay.
But I do need to, you deserve to hear this, because this is actually your quote. And I love that you agree with your quote, because profit is not a dirty word. But what you went on to say is profit is not a dirty word. It is what fuels innovation. It is what rewards risk and enables us to share success with others. And I think in closing, what's a beautiful thing about the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, it's not just about getting entrepreneurs started or scaling or even thinking about succession. It's about releasing that energy that becomes a culture as you published and registered in the 50s on fair enterprise thinking.
I think maybe I'd like to add the services we provide. Huh?
Please.
We have a service to call it young people just starting out or what, thinking about going in business, being an entrepreneur, like a university graduate or colleges or high school. They all could, right? Okay, so what you would get, you get two books, right? The Magna Man is basically practically the Bible for young entrepreneurs, and the Economic Charter of Rights, which reinforces that you should share with workers, right? So you get two books, which will be very, very handy. There'll be a newsletter, to all the thing here, to all the participants or members of the fair enterprise system. We would have quarterly meetings, right? With where we invite a random like that you could participate directing with the key people which run the
academy.
The academy, okay. And so that would be very helpful because, let's say, we would invite randomly 30 entrepreneurs, and they would ask questions. And if you be a member in the academy, you can participate. You can listen. You get all the and this is one of the greatest learning when you get, let's say, 30 entrepreneurs and the management, to call it the key management of the academy, of the Stronach Academy, including myself. We will give 2 hours every quarter where we have websites where the members can participate, and then they would have also. Every participant could answer or could ask for 3 questions, right? Okay, and this will be a yearly program, and we would repeat the things over and over, and we try to educate that entrepreneurs and small businesses are the strength of the country.
I love that. I mean, if I were to paraphrase much of what you said, that for anybody that's interested in getting started or wanting to scale a business here in Canada, embodying the spirit of your Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities that's powered by the fair enterprise methodology and mindset, what they get by joining is they get not only a beautiful library of your published thought leadership, founded in not just the Magna Man, but also, of course, in the CEC. They get connected to the Academy with a regular newsletter where we share insights and ideologies and maybe even case studies from time to time. It sounds like the quarterly meetings, here comes the fun, is like a mastermind, and a mastermind where we're gonna be collecting entrepreneurial leaders who's gonna share best practices, provide insight and inspiration for those who are either getting started or scaling, so that they're emboldened in their entrepreneurial journey. I believe that's what it sounds like that we're up to.
And they get a step-by-step from a small company to grow to one of the largest companies by having many small companies. That's the blueprint. It's how we
think, how we allocate the profits, how to run the business.
Yes, the structures, etc.
The structure,
et
the
cetera,
system,
right?
the decentralization of management.
That is, you could never pay for that, right? I mean, it's
no, it's not out for sale. It's included in becoming a part of the academy. You know, what gets me excited, and I know that for those who may have watched you, Frank, just profile the documents, I mean, at this stage in your life to be so excited about holding, I mean, if I may, like this is just merely papers, but this took right here 90 years to create and realize and understand the fruits of your labor of both mind and mechanics created a blueprint that Canadians can also emulate. Yes?
So basically, if you, we of course we censored that, but basically we demonstrate a society. The foundation, the pillars of a society is labor, its management, and its capital. Those are the three pillars which hold up a society, and the government must be a sound foundation. Without a sound foundation, a society cannot work, right? So we gotta improve governments, right? The government should not be mandated to deal with economic matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love it.
So and we got to realize that our politicians really they're trapped in the system.
That's right.
I know them. I know them all. They find people. They want to help the country, but they're trapped. But the older politicians say to the younger politicians, "No, we cannot bring that forward because it's new. We could be criticized."
It is
Okay,
true.
that's why you don't see anybody bringing forward the system. At this time, it's just only name calling. Okay,
That's right.
so we gotta get away from that, right?
It sounds like we're not just getting started, we're well on our way with the Academy, its launch, and what we're doing. Frank, I can't believe that time with you flies when we're having fun. I'm so delighted that we get to have these conversations.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Folks, what an incredible conversation. We've talked about the economy, the geopolitical events, and how it's reshaping the Canadian economic landscape. But you don't have to be trapped by it, and you don't have to live by its pressures or gravity. As we heard from Frank, this mentorship opportunity is available to all people seeking not just their own economic sovereignty, but their economic freedom, as defined by Frank. If you want to learn how to leverage, exploit, and dare I say, optimally monetize your passion for being an entrepreneur, which is the lifeblood for any economic charter of rights to really exist and help others, you can learn more by writing us at the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship. Or to get involved in the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, you can learn more by writing us there as well.
And enrolling in the academy, be a member of the academy.
You heard the boss.
Yeah.
Don't think about it. Don't ask us any questions. Just enroll in the academy, because the best time to have planted a tree was 30 years ago, but the second best time is right now. Frank, thank you so much. Please.
Make a very important statement.
I do want to hear
At the academy or at Magna, there were no bosses. Okay, we only were associates. Some associates had more responsibility than others, but we want to get away. The boss culture is a gone thing here. The boss culture has disgruntled employees. We only have associates. Some have more responsibility than others.
I love that. That's why I'm going to call him partner, not boss.
Yeah.
Frank
That's
Stronach,
right.
bringing the genius, bringing the brilliance, but more importantly, bringing his legacy and his life and all that he's learned, captured, and mastered over all these years. He wants you to be his pupil. He wants you to be mentored by him and the years collectively that he's now called the Academy. Until next time, I'm Richard Dolan, having had a conversation with our very own Frank Stronach.